All right, good morning, everybody. So, like I said, each week we get a few more back every single week, so more people back to church, so we're glad you're here. This is our this will be our fifth week back meeting. So, if you haven't been here with us, we are going through a series that's called Lessons in the Aftermath, or we are just taking some lessons, hopefully, that we have learned through these past several weeks, or it's been more than several weeks, like the last 10 to 15 weeks, as we have gone through this virus. So some lessons we have learned that sometimes we don't notice when we're just living life on a regular routine. Sometimes it takes a crisis like this or something to help us realize some things that maybe we were unaware of about ourselves, to learn some lessons from. So we're just going to make sure as we go through this this time in our history, this time in our community, time in our society, that we actually find some things that can benefit us into the future, and we get some value out of this time. So in week one, what we talked about real quick is we talked about being able to control the things that you can control and focus on those things, and letting go of the things you need to let go of that you can control, and finding that proper balance. In week two, we talked about how important people and relationships are to our lives and to our mental health, and the role that the church plays in that. And then in week three, we talked about how we need to take personal responsibility for our spiritual growth, that we need to make sure that we are doing our work on our end, building our spiritual growth and our walk with Christ, and not just relying on a church or a teacher or a minister being the person who grows us, but something that we take personal responsibility in. Today, what we're going to be talking about is that we actually have responsibility for each other as a church family. So as we start to talk about this topic, I just want to share some realities with you of the society and environment that we are currently living in at this time in history. So here are just some stats I want to throw at you. 38% of kids in Tulsa live in single-parent households. Okay, so 4 in 10 children in the city of Tulsa live in single-parent households. That number nationally is 23%, so about a quarter of our kids in the nation grow up in a single-parent household, and that is the highest number in the world. Okay, so we have the largest portion of children growing up in single-parent households of any place else in the entire world. Only 19% of kids today actually are raised and live in what's called a nuclear family. And a nuclear family, the way that is traditionally defined, is the actual biological mother and father and their children living in the same house together. Okay, only 19%. Give you an idea, back in 1960, that was 77%. And now it's 19%, all right? 19% of people that live in Tulsa live alone. So they live alone, so 1 in 5 people live alone in Tulsa. Over the last 30 years, the typical family spends 30% less time together on a daily basis. Right now, according to the data, the typical family spends 29 minutes a day together, actually, where they're communicating and actually have like a fruitful discussion. 29 minutes a day where family members actually do that. On the topic of loneliness, a few things. 63% of American men say they are lonely. 58% of women say they are lonely. Now, what that points out is this: men are better friends than women. Just saying, we do a better job making you feel like you have friends. So women, when you say we don't communicate enough, the stats say we're the better communicators. That's what I read in those stats. Maybe you read something different, but that's what I read. All right, so here's the other thing. People are heavy internet users, and what that is described as is anyone under the age of 18. And you spend 6+ hours a day on the internet, 73% of right? Those who are light internet users, internet 3 or less hours a day, 52%. That's an amazing stat. 52 sounds like a lot, but it's 21% more. All right? And the reason for that is simply this: social media and the internet, it makes us find entertainment alone rather than with other people, so naturally it leads to feelings of loneliness. So you might feel yourself in the presence of others, physical presence, and still be isolated from them because your entire focus is on the internet and it's on a screen rather than the actual people around you. Gen Z, which is those that are aged 4 to 24, actually report the highest rate of loneliness. So our youngest generation. Boomers, those 56 to 76 right now, actually have the lowest described loneliness which is kind of odd because boomers that have a higher percentage of living alone, they feel less loneliness. So there's something culturally going on there that we see. What this all points to is this: how important the concept of family is and how badly people need family, how much they need family structure. Now I want to ask a question here, and I want you to think about it for a quick second before I go through this next part. How many of you would say you grew up in a healthy family? And not, I wish it was healthy, or I got to tell people around, no one really knows you here. You don't have to say I did, but I didn't. How many of you, just raise your hands real quick, would say you grew up in what you would consider a very healthy family environment? So you're about 40% here. Okay, that's pretty high for that. But that means about 60% of you aren't. And I noticed Kevin, Russell, and Long, none of them raised their hands. Good job, Anisha. Fine. Fabulous job. No, I'm just saying. I'm just making a joke with you. You don't even know what I said, but they'll fill you in later. All right? So here, let me just tell you some of the reasons why family is important. If you grew up in a healthy family, you'll be familiar with these things, but there are huge benefits to growing up in a healthy family. A healthy family provides you unconditional love. So if you grow up in a healthy family, you just always know you're loved. The benefit of that is you're not seeking love from others, because it's just something that's inside you. It's a natural thing you have, is you just feel loved. You know you're loved. You're not trying to earn someone else's love, so you're not chasing other people trying to receive a love that you never got. And that's a huge benefit in life. A healthy family provides you healthy correction. And what that means is you get instruction and you get discipline that will help you be successful in life later on. So you don't have to do everything through trial and error, where you make huge mistakes and then pay for it and work your way out of it. In a healthy family, typically you have parents who help you realize when you're doing the small things so you can correct it when it's small rather than doing the big things and making huge errors. That's a huge benefit to a healthy family. The other one that you get is a greater financial stability from a healthy family, because you always have a group of people that if you get in a major financial bind, you can go back to, and you have some people who can help you financially. For instance, I've sucked so much money out of my parents over the years just to stay afloat. No, I'm just kidding. But they do give you a financial structure and people that you can go to that are more established, because you have generations older than you that typically are more established financially to help you out. There's a huge benefit to that. A healthy family gives you personal protection. If you had siblings, it was always nice if you had older ones, because sometimes they could fight your fights for you, correct? I was the youngest. I didn't get this much because my brother is actually he was 6 years older than me, so we didn't know each other great. But it was always nice to be able to say in a bind, I'll get my older brother. Okay, and then they would go, I will get my older brother. And I was like, at least I don't have to deal with it anymore. That's my brother's issue, okay? But you get that personal protection. You also, if you have a mom and dad that are at home with you, you also have them fight some of your battles. I remember as a kid, my sister having some issue with another girl, and I must have been younger because it left an impression on me. And I remember seeing her crying and stuff, and it's something that happened at school, and I remember my dad going, I'll go fix it. And I remember my dad having to go to someone's house or something and take care of it and clear it up and all that stuff. And then you go, in a healthy family, that's the type of stuff that happens. The other couple things a healthy family provides: good role models. You grow up with a mom and dad that are role models, hopefully older siblings that are a role model that you can follow behind. As I look at my life, that is one of the biggest benefits my family gave me, is my brother and sister are incredible people. My parents are incredible people. So I knew nothing other than I'm going to be like them, because I had the role model to follow. And so you get good role models. The last one is this: it provides a social structure that avoids loneliness. When you're in a healthy family, you never really feel lonely, because you can always just relax and be who you are at home. And this is a big one, because some of you that grew up in families, but they weren't necessarily what you would consider healthy, a lot of times you tried to isolate yourself from other family members because you didn't want to be around them. It wasn't a healthy environment. And so you felt lonely a lot, even though you were with family. In a healthy family, you never really feel lonely because you just have people you can talk to every time. There's always people around that you can talk to, hang out with. You're never feeling like you're on your own. Now, the Bible numerous times describes the church as a family for believers. Okay, let me just give you two instances. In Ephesians 2, verse 19, it says this: So now you Gentiles, so non-Jewish people, now you Gentiles are no longer strangers and foreigners. So the reason Paul is saying this is the Jews were God's people, and everybody, the Gentiles, were outsiders. So everyone always saw the Jews as kind of like this isolated little group that kept to themselves, that were their own family of God. But now after Christ coming in, his death and his resurrection and his ascension into heaven, that family is opened up to everybody, to the Gentiles as well. So he says here, so now you Gentiles are no longer strangers and foreigners, basically, to God. You are now citizens along with all of God's holy people. You are members of God's what? Family. Okay? If you go to 1 Peter 2, verse 17, it says, respect everyone and love the family of believers. And as you read the New Testament, you see this over and over and over again of the church being described as a family for each other. So we are called to be a family for each other. At the core of that, what that means is we are responsible for each other as the family of God, to ensure that none of us who have decided to make this our church family and go, we want to be members of this family, ever feel like we are doing life alone, that we always feel like we have a community, a family that's around us to support us and provide us the help that we need during the tough times in life. So what I'm going to do this morning, I'm just going to walk you through 3 areas that we're responsible for each other as a church family. So if you are a member of this church, or if you consider this like your church home and you're here regularly, there is a benefit to being a member because it makes us take our responsibility a little bit different towards you. But there's 3 things that we're responsible for each other as a church family, and that's why I want to walk you through. So here they are. The first one is this. We're responsible for each other's spiritual health. Okay? As you look around this building, as more of us start to file back into church and stuff like that, you need to realize that other people sitting around you who are parts of this church family at Christview, you have a responsibility to help them spiritually and in their spiritual health and their walk with God. Let me give you 3 kind of little areas I found scriptures of that talk about different aspects of that spiritual health. The first one is in James 5, and it talks about our role in correcting each other's sin. Now, this is a difficult one, okay? Because a lot of times in church, when people try to correct your sin, people go, you're just judging, and you hate me, and you're upset with me, and going, no. Proper judging and proper correction of sin is actually meant as a loving act to pull you back to a healthy spot, all right? So if you think about in a typical family, if your child is doing something idiotic that you know is going to hurt them, is the loving thing to encourage the idiocy, or is the loving thing to inform them why that's not good and try to stop them from doing it? What's the loving thing, A or B? It's B, right? If you truly love your child, you're going to go, this is going to hurt you. I'm going to try to protect you. That doesn't mean they're always going to listen to you and do what you want, but at least your role as a loving parent, as a loving sibling, is to go, I'm going to try to protect you. And that's one of the roles we have in our spiritual health with each other. It says this in James chapter 5. This is Jesus' brother speaking. He says, my dear brothers and sisters, if someone among you wanders away from the truth and is brought back, you can be sure that whoever brings that sinner back from wandering will save that person from death and bring about the forgiveness of many sins. Okay? And so what you get a sense of from James is, as a church community, as a family of God, we are to be attentive to what's going on in each other's lives. So if we see us starting to drift off into an area that we know is going to bring pain and hurt, we are to try to intervene in a loving way to go, hey, I'm concerned for you, and I can see where this is going, and this is not what God desires for us in our lives, and it brings about bad consequences, and try to pull them back. Because it says here in the scriptures, those that do that save a person from death and bring about forgiveness of many sins. If you don't have a church community to do that, you can just wander off wherever and no one cares. Okay, you just go live your life, do what you want to do. Don't worry about anyone caring about you, and no one cares, and no one's going to say a thing. And you can drift into darkness wherever you want, and no one will bat an eye and just be like, we don't care. All right, that's one of the dangers of bigger churches. And again, I'm not one that criticizes bigger churches all the time. I don't have an issue with bigger churches. But one of the weaknesses is, because you don't know people, you can get lost in the crowd very easily. And there is no way to help each other and be responsible for each other's spiritual health. And in one of those areas, it's helping each other recognize sin. So if I see Dan, and I know something going on in Dan's life, that I, sitting from my position, look at and go, that's not going to be good for Dan. And that's not typical Dan's character. And as a loving person in his body and his family, I am obligated to go to Dan to say, hey, Dan, can we talk for a few? And have a conversation with him. In the same regard, if Rick sees me and sees some things going on, he has an obligation as part of this family to come sit with me and be like, hey, we need to talk a little bit, okay? In this church, we have a healthy environment of that because we know we love each other, because we can look at things, and like Rick, we've had those conversations, some, haven't we? Jim, we've had those conversations, some, haven't we? If Steve Gardner was in here, not security, we've had those. Mark does it to me 3 times a week. But we have an environment where it's healthy, okay, because I know these people love me, so I can take correction. A couple of other areas. Hebrews 10, it says this. It talks about motivating each other to do kingdom work, to stay kingdom focused. It says in chapter 10, let us think of ways of motivating one another to acts of love and good works. Of looking at each other and going, how can I motivate you to continue to do kingdom work? How can I motivate you to do loving acts for other people? How can I motivate you and inspire you to do that? In Colossians 3, we see part of our spiritual health responsibility is teaching each other, okay? And Colossians 3, verse 16, it says, let the message of Christ and all of its richness fill our lives, teach and counsel each other with all the wisdom that he gives. So we get a clear understanding here that we are to teach each other. We are to be around other people that have greater wisdom and understanding of the scriptures and learn from them so we can grow as individuals as well. And so God puts us together as a family to learn from. Same way in a typical family, your parents hopefully teach you wisdom so you don't make the same mistakes as they made. Hopefully your siblings teach you some of the mistakes they made so you don't make them. Same thing in a church we are to do is teach each other the wisdom of life that we have to one another, okay? The second area of responsibility we have is our financial needs, okay? The second area of responsibility we have as a family of God to each other. It is not the government's role when it comes to helping people within our family. We have gone a little too much reliant on the government as a church, that when people in our church are hurting, well, the government will take care of it, okay? That is not how the family of God was designed. The family of God was designed when someone in our church is struggling financially, the first place they should go to is the church to find a way to have their needs met and for the church to care for them because we are family. If I'm living with my family and I have a financial struggle or something, my first thought isn't I need to go get the government to give me money. My first thought is I need to go to mom and dad or my family and talk to them and hopefully they can help me. All right? It's the same thing with the family of God. We have pushed this responsibility off to a government rather than taking it seriously and we doing it ourselves. In 1 John, John is very straightforward about this topic. Let me read this to you in chapter 3, verse 17. He says this, if someone has enough money to live well, let me stop there for a second. If you are in this church family and you have enough money to live well, which I would take as fairly comfortable. You're doing pretty good. Money is not a concern of yours day in, day out. You live fairly well, okay? You have most things you'd like to have. You're pretty comfortable. So he says here, if you are someone that has enough money to live well and sees a brother or sister in need, but shows no compassion, how can God's love be in that person? So he says, as a family of God, I'm living well, and I hear about a need in this church family, and I just go, yeah, not really a big concern to me, and that's how I treat that, that's a problem. Because what John is saying is, how can God's love be in that person if you show them no compassion and you don't try to help them out? We are called to be generous with each other and take care of each other because we are the family of God, so that no one in here suffers need where their needs are not met. And it does not say everyone has to live comfortably or live well, but everyone's needs should be met. The reason we came up with the Let No One Fall ministry is because our leadership is very aware of what chapters 2 and chapters 4 of the book of Acts talk about in the early church. And that's where the idea came from the Let No One Fall ministry. And what that was, if you're not aware of it real quick, when this whole rescue check thing came out that most of you probably received at this point, we decided, because we knew the economic fallout of shutting down the entire American economy was, we didn't know what it would result in, or how bad it would result in or how much our church family would be affected by it. So we put out word to all of you that if you don't need that stimulus check or that rescue check, you could just donate it right to the church because it wasn't anything you worked for. You could take it, you could donate it to the church, and we would pool it together. And then the leadership would use that when we heard of needs in the church to help others out in the church that got hit harder by the shutdown than others. Because we wanted to make sure no one here fell, no one here had their needs not met. And we've also said this, we don't want the people of our church family coming out of this whole Corona thing behind the 8 ball and going, man, now it's going to take me 3 years to dig out of all the debt I went into during that time of the coronavirus. We want to make sure we can keep your bills up to date and we can take care of you. To this date, I think the people of this church have donated somewhere a little over $18,000 just in a few weeks with that. And we've given out, I think so far, $5,000 within some people in the church here that need help. So that we're taking care of each other as a church family, okay? That's what we are called to do. Let me read to you where we got this idea. Acts chapter 2 and Acts chapter 4. In chapter 2 it says this, talk about the early church. They sold their property and possessions and they shared the money with those in need. So those that were living well sold some of their stuff and went, hey, that person needs help, Rodney needs help, I'll sell my stuff so I can help Rodney out. Okay? You go to Acts chapter 4. It says, there was no needy people among them. Talk about the early church. Because those who owned land or houses would sell them and bring the money to the apostles, those in need. This is quite amazing if you think about it. In the early church, there were people that were living so well, they had multiple houses, multiple pieces of land, and they were so committed to the family of God to make sure people's needs were met. If they saw needs that couldn't be met, they would actually go sell some of their extra houses and their land and then take that cash, give it to the elders of the church and say, hey guys, distribute it how it needs to be distributed to take care of the needs of the people. And that's what you saw in the early church. That's what we've tried to model through this no one fall ministry, is to look like the early church and the mandate we see in the early scripture. So we're responsible for each other's financial need. The last area we're responsible for is each other's mental health. Okay, we are responsible for each other's mental health as a family of God. Let me give you some ways that plays out. The first one is this, in comforting each other. We are to comfort each other and help play a role in making sure that is done within our church family. Here's what it reads in 2 Corinthians 1. He comforts us, so in reference to God, God comforts us in our troubles so that we can comfort others. When they are troubled, we'll be able to give them the same comfort God has given us. Here's a beautiful thing about the family of God. There are people sitting in this audience right here who have suffered everything most of you have ever suffered, that have come through it, that have seen the grace of God and the miracle of God restore them, rebuild them, turn them into the people they are today, but they still have the same history that you might be going through today. The reason that is important is God puts us together as a family so you are not left on your own, isolated in those moments. So for instance, if you're someone here who's being abused, okay, and you were abused as a child and it's background story or whatever, I can link you up with someone in this church that went through the same thing. Okay? If you're someone that's going through a divorce and struggling with that, you know what? I can link you up with someone who's gone through that and come out the other side of it. If you're in a situation of spousal abuse or something like that, I can link you up. If you come talk to us, we can link you up with someone that's gone through that and help you escape that situation, fix that situation, and take care of you. If you are someone who is struggling with past things you've done in your past, so such instances of like if you were, again, abused in different ways, I won't talk because there's kids in here. If you've had abortions and the mental toll that takes on you and things like that, and those are things you're holding on to it you've never spoken to anyone about, we can link you up with other people in the church that have spoken to us about those things, that God has worked with them, and they've come out the other side and comfort them, that we can link you up with to go, here's someone that has similar experiences that God has done a work in, and they can help you. That was one of the calls of the church family, is to comfort each other, help us through our mental health issues that we suffer from. In 1 Thessalonians, we see we are to encourage each other. I read this one a lot because I want this to represent who we are as a church. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, it says, so encourage each other, build each other up, just as you are already doing. As Paul tells us, hey, encourage each other, build each other up. Think of ways that you can make people feel good when you're in a church. For instance, my wife did this during coronavirus. I don't do this because I hate writing letters and stuff. But most of you that are members of this church, except for you two, because yours got returned last week, just so you know. But she sat for like 4 or 5 straight nights just writing little handwritten notes to everybody in the church, and she went through like the church directory and wrote handwritten notes to everybody because she just felt like she needed to do something to encourage people during the coronavirus. So if you think I did it, it wasn't me. It's all my wife. It was my idea, and I told her to get down and start writing those things, okay? But she did that just as a thing to encourage each other. Why? It's our church family. And she felt like that's something people probably could use right now because people are just getting discouraged, people were struggling, and just a little note sometimes as they pick me up. So yours, I think, is back at our house now with a return thing that can prove we sent it to you, but it never got to your house, okay? So that's one of the other things we're supposed to do. Now, here's the last part of this mental health thing is it's something we have to take initiative on. We have to have intentional acts that we go do for others in our church. In Philippians 2, it says this, don't look out only for your own interest, but take interest in others too. What that implies is this, in the church family, you're thinking about other people. You're thinking about what's going on in your life, and you're taking initiative to do something about it. Here's where we get stuck sometimes. A lot of people wait for the minister or the leadership to tell them what to go do. Okay? You're a functioning human being with a brain that God has given you, with desires, with a spirit that speaks to you and leads you. You should not have to wait for a minister or eldership to tell you what to go do to encourage each other and build each other up. You should instinctively, when you feel it, take initiative and go do something about it. Go say the kind word, write the little note, go shake the hand, go ask someone how they're doing. You have to take initiative on this. This is something that you have to do on your own. To go, I have to go do that. I have to take intentional actions to go do that instead of waiting for someone to tell me. This is a big one we mess up on as a church family. So many times we have these things in our head and they stay there. And they become the thing I'm going to do next week or next month. And before we know it, 4 years later, we've thought about it every month for 4 years and we've never done a thing about it. And so we have to be intentional. We have to take initiative as a church family to build each other up, encourage each other, and help each other with mental health issues in little ways that we can. You see, God gave us a church so that through the church, everyone would have the opportunity to be part of a healthy family and all the benefits a healthy family provides to us. Let's make sure we're fulfilling our responsibilities to each other so that we as a church are the church that God desires us to be. Because at the end of the day, everyone, whether they are Christian or non-Christian, wants to be part of a healthy family. I truly believe one of the greatest draws of the church would be if we were truly a healthy family. Because everybody you talk to, no matter who they are, everybody wants to live in like that perfect family. Do they not? Like everyone, even people in abusive situations and horrible situations, people who grow up totally neglected, everybody has a dream of growing up in like that nice little family that's nice, that people care for me and I can find love and acceptance and I can be there and there's people to help me and I'm not on my own anymore. Everybody desires that. Unfortunately, much of the time throughout our history, the church in America has not shown that family. But we are called to be that family. Make sure you are taking your responsibilities seriously. So as a church family together, we look like that healthy family to the world that people deeply desire to be part of. And through that, God will bring people to himself through his church family and continue to grow that family with more and more people. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father,